Hello and welcome to Soulful Thoughts from New Zealand. I am your host, Meghan Dawn, mentor, death and dying guide, and award-winning author of Meditations with Teresa of Avila, Feminine Courage, and other books on the mystics. Before we begin our podcast today, I would like to invite you to join me on what I believe is a much needed offering at this time. A 4-part Divine Mother meditation series that I am offering beginning July 14th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time and continuing every 2 weeks through August 25th. These calls will be both live and recorded, so you can access these in-depth sessions at any time. With the constant and continuing destructive energies and events in our world, we all need a place to find refuge, a place to be held and even rocked, a place of soul nourishment and safety. Love is the Divine Mother's arms. When those arms are spread, every soul falls into them. That's a quote from Hazrat Inayat Khan. So it is up to us to ask the Mother to open her arms and then allow ourselves to fully fall into them. You know, when we fall physically, we lose all control. When we fall spiritually, we completely surrender. So every session will begin with a message from the Mother and what she wants us to know and focus on. And every session will also bring forward a different face of the Mother. We will chant, meditate, reflect, and share. We will ask the Mother any questions in our hearts. And finally, we will spread out to the world what the Mother gives us, bringing calm, hope, and ease to the great suffering of so many. So please do join me for this Divine Mother meditation series, and you'll find all the info on my website at meghandawn.life. And now on to our podcast today. I am delighted to introduce you to my dear friend and colleague, Simran. So here we have Simran, who is a globally recognized speaker and catalyst for love, compassion, and humanity. She is the publisher of 1111 magazine, host of 1111 Talk Radio, and guide for 1111 Interviews TV. She is an artist, poet, and soulful mentor. Simran is the author of multiple award-winning books and is releasing the self-realization trilogy of living, being, and knowing. Simran lives in Charleston, South Carolina, and she can be found on her website at iamsimran.com. That is iamsimran.com. So Simran, welcome, and it is so great to have you here today for this conversation.
Thank you, Meghan. It is a delight for me, and you are one of my most favorite women on the planet. The way you speak, what you teach, the newsletters you send out, the work, the writing of your books, they have always touched me and resonated so deeply in my heart. And the fact that we were able to meet in Charleston years ago, I just feel we are such kindred spirits and sisters on this path together.
Yes, me too. Me too. It's just a delight, always, always. And I love how the spirit works of crossing our paths, you know, creating that great web of connection and love. And even though I'm now in New Zealand and you're over there in Charleston, I don't feel any less connection. I don't feel any separation. So the sisterhood runs very, very deep, which I'm grateful for. So,
It's rare. It is so rare
mhm,
sometimes to find another that
mhm,
truly will sit in the muck and the mire with you and see its beauty in the way that you can see it, and understand these hard and dark places that we all have to wade through,
mm,
that we may not want to wade through. But when you meet another on the path that has been there, that has walked through it, that has a deep understanding of the different archetypes and aspects and faces that we carry, and willingly embraces that in the same way with such love and compassion, that to me is the face of God meeting the face of God. And I
mm,
think that that resonance of meeting another like that, it brings that much more wholeness and peace within, because you've almost grasped another piece of yourself that is outside of you, that you've now made integrated and whole with you.
absolutely. And as we both know, we have both been through a lot of muck and mire. But as we both know, we always keep popping our head right back up.
With a smile and a laugh.
Absolutely. You know, it's, I have to say the humor is got to be the savior of this planet. If nothing else. It's yeah, it's a beautiful thing to be able
Yes.
to laugh and to cry and to speak deeply and to feel deeply. Just so lovely. Which brings me to your books, the trilogy that you are currently releasing. Such a blessing to the world, and it feels so relevant at this time, almost uncannily so. So just to look, first of all, at your first book, Living, the 7 Blessings of Human Experience. And it says here, this guides individuals through the cycle of experience, which continues to repeat over and over again as we master a set of unorthodox blessings such as challenge, conflict, chaos, obstacles, darkness, and death. So, can you speak a little bit about your own experience with these unorthodox blessings and how you came to recognize them as such, and then how you came to write about them?
Yes, and the key word is cycle, because and the first blessing is actually the blessing of life, which begins that cycle of 7. And I've always known that we've had cycles and rhythms. I've been the type that has looked at signs, symbols, and synchronicities in my life. And I've known the patterns and the behaviors that sometimes would pop back up and repeat. But it was only in meeting a moment of grief that was so intense that it felt as if I was put through a wormhole, and allowed myself to be so present that I was willing to dive deeply into each cycle and really what it was bringing. I think that my greatest desire has always been to be human, to feel, because that was something that I didn't do much of. It was not something that was modeled in my family. It was in the Indian culture, it's so often about productivity or image or who you're going to be or perfection or the respect of whatever your elders say, that's who you become. So conditioning is very deep, and it begins extremely early on. And I fell into that to such an extent that I really didn't know who I was. And I don't know that I will ever know who I truly was before the conditioning. It began so early. But this moment of grief was so intense that I knew every step of my life and every step of everyone else's life is often unconscious to the fact that they are reactive to the childhood wounds that we've had, and don't realize that our choices and our behaviors are doing that. And that's what creates the cycle of these 7 blessings. And they will go in this order over and over again as we go through our life. And so my intention for these books, and particularly the first one, is to reframe the way we look at these things, such as challenge and chaos and conflict and darkness and death, because there is a special gift in these, not just a silver lining or the platitudes that we hear people say to try to get through something, but there's a deepening process that we can engage in that actually allows us to move to a higher octave of being. But it's only in embracing exactly where we are that we're going to do that.
And it seems to be, I mean, that we have that personal journey, but also, you know, we're also looking at that, these obstacles arising in our outer life as well. But before we go there, I also want you to speak to me. You talk about the 7 layers of blessing. So what are these 7 layers?
So each of the 7 blessings, as I sat during this period of time, which happened to be 7 years, each of these books comprise of a different level of multidimensional being that's within us. And as I sat within each of the blessings, I realized that it too had multidimensional levels, that we were engaging a specific path through each blessing. And that path would help us then see what type of energy was being reflected. So the second level has to do everything with energy. And then it's going to awaken a place where we're supposed to grow. And that growth and that mastery would lead us to a place of restoration, a place where we would uncover a truth that we were here to uncover. And in uncovering that truth, what would be revealed would be wisdom. And that would be an invitation for us to unify with some aspect of us, which then allows this opening of gifts that would come through us. So along with being the cycle of blessings, there's an internal alchemy that is taking place if we're really present to what it is that we're going through in our life. And we've been taught in this world to get on with it, to move forward, to ascend to something, to attain something, to be ambitious, to run really, really fast. And what I found when I committed to the darkness in a way that I had always committed to the light, that was the inquiry for me, is can I commit to the darkness equally so? What I found was that anyone can reach enlightenment if they simply stay present to what they've been given, rather than trying to escape, deny, or distract themselves from it.
Yeah, that sacred presence and being present to what is well, that's the place where I find that magic happens, you know?
Yes.
Pure magic happens. And one then, I don't know, when I come into that presence, no matter what it is, there is that transformational transmutation, the alchemy that you speak of. And that to me opens you to such a, I guess, experience of unification with all that is, with all of life, that then your own life becomes in perspective. You know, I feel that your own life, you can look at it from that place, that it's exactly as it's meant to be. and it's like, yeah, how many people can say, oh, I'm happy with my life exactly as it is? You know, it's like, no, it seems to be this constant striving, this constant running away from what hurts and running towards what we think will make us feel better. And yet to just sit in the presence, it's like, you know, everything opens. I think there's a great quote by Kafka, actually, where he says, you know, I don't have to leave my room. I just need to wait. Oh no, I don't even need to wait. I just need to sit. And then the world will come and unfurl itself at my feet.
Yes.
Right?
It's exactly it. But we have never been modeled that. We've never been taught that.
Mm.
And we complain about this world of duality. We want to be angered and upset at the division that we see. We want to be
Mm.
horrified
Mm.
by the wars that take place. We want to grieve and cry and scream at the separation that exists in our relationships, in our families, in our societies, in our world. But what
Mm.
we fail to recognize is that we have not dealt with the divide inside yet.
Mm.
And
Mm.
until we're willing to deal with the divide inside, there can be no unity or unification outside.
Mm.
And we only truly recognize that divide if we're willing to sit and be with it, to not just wait, but to sit and let the
Yeah.
world meet us there,
Yeah.
because we're willing to meet ourselves there.
Yeah. 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 Beautiful. So let's go on to your second book and the current release, Being, the 7 illusions that derail personal power, purpose, and peace. And here I want to read something from your press release, because I just love this. Were these times made for us? Were these times made by us? The scales of universal justice are rebalancing elements of crisis, chaos, and dysfunction within our social systems and global structures. By becoming aware of our individual expressions of fear, self-obsession, and separation, there is an opportunity to transcend the human condition and create a greater good for all. Being, the second book in this self-realization series, addresses the 7 illusions of social conditioning: time, duality, money, hierarchy, identity, evolution, and war. So I am just fascinated by this. I love it, because we always hear, we were made for these times, and personally, I'm like, really? I didn't think I was going to be here personally. But I love this. Were these times made by us? Now that's a bit more real.
Yes. Yeah, it's the radical truth, and it's putting the face in the mirror and saying, what have you really created? What have you
Yeah.
really done?
Yeah.
And in my own sitting of 7 years of grief and every other emotion and energy that could rise up through my body and that I could discover within my own physiology, deeply, deeply and viscerally embedded within my physiology, what I discovered, that there were 3 of me. There was a capital self, capital S, lowercase ELF, which was the person, the identity, the face I put in the world, the voice that I speak, who people recognize.
Mm-hmm.
This self of us is most often unconscious, a majority of the time. Even me, the one that writes books and the magazines and the radio show, I can proclaim to be highly conscious and all of this, but I would be bamboozling myself into some illusion, because in truth, most of the time we are all unconscious in our actions, reactions, and responses. And so there is a second aspect of us that is the lowercase self, SELF. And that is the deeply hidden part of us that is the shadow that you so often speak of and write about so beautifully in your books as well. The part of us that so many other teachers have started talking about, that we have to deal with the shadow. But when I went deeper, Meghan, I met the animal. I met the animal inside me that hungers, that growls, the one that wants to pounce, the one that crouches in the woods waiting for something. I met that part of me, and I could feel it stirring. And it's part of the conditioning that we take on that we don't even realize. It's also instinctually who we are as animal beings. So there is this part of us that's naturally this way, and this part of us that's been conditioned this way. And as I went deeper, I met the monster, the side of me, the side of all of us that could commit murder, that could berate someone, that could rape someone with their words or their actions. There's a part of us inside that is that monstrous that we can't even face seeing. And when we finally meet it, I was horrified meeting mine. We will be horrified because we can't fathom that. That's why we become so outraged when we see it outside of us. We project all that out onto the one that we have now committed to creating those acts because we're unwilling to see ourselves in that way. And then I went deeper and I discovered the demon, all the inner demons that are there, the darkest of the dark. And it was only in recognizing all that deeply unconsciousness that was there and sitting with each until I could not only be neutral with them, but love them, be compassionate for them, have an understanding of who they were, why they were there, what they had to say, and really understand they were always present. That while the self-identity is operating in the world, this other self is equally present. I'm just not present to it. But it's always there. It's another part of me that makes me whole. And then there's a third part, which is the capital SELF. And that is the humanity. That is the higher part of us that will ascend to opening to a higher self, that will open to our divinity. The part of us that is willing to flower in that humanity. And we are here to embrace and integrate these three to be whole. And only then can we truly create oneness in the world or recognize another as our brother. Until we're really willing to see ourselves fully, it cannot happen.
Yeah, I love that when you actually called it a monster, because we use that for very, pathological beings, who are deeply disturbed. And we wouldn't even consider that some form of monster could be living within. So, and yes, like you, I've also encountered that. And it is a little scary, but also, and as you say, you have to, you once you have compassion, and then once you love them, then what I discovered in my journey was they kind of melt.
Yes.
They then become these sweet pussycats.
Yes.
And they just melt all over the floor. And then they actually can turn and then they can serve. They turn and they can serve your journey. They can serve other people. They can serve the world.
Yes.
And so their whole dynamics completely transfigures. And I think then, as you say, then that fullness of the human being can come into fruition. It's like Mary Magdalene says, now is the time for us to become fully human, and it's just such an incredible journey to take, to realize the fullness of what this really being fully human is. And I just want to put in here, I've actually, as I've been writing a book on death and dying, and I did speak about mourning at one point, and this ability to grieve and mourn. And as you may know, and those who know me well, I am quite expressive. And there were a couple of times where the grief was so intense that the howl,
yes,
howled. And one of these times was actually out publicly. It was because my house was burning down and everything that I'd worked for was just going up in flames. And I just let out this howl. And these poor people, they were like strangers and neighbors on the street. They didn't know what to do because it was such a guttural animal and you could see some of them wanted to come to me, but they weren't sure. Others were just terrified of me and kind of ran away. And, it was like, but there it was. And it was so great because it was there in that moment. I was being completely present to what I was feeling.
Yes. Well, that's just it, because until we're able to be present to those places, then nothing can change. There's an issue with so much of spirituality or personal growth in the way it's been propagated, in that we have to kill off the ego. We have to get rid of our shadow. You're not supposed to feel certain emotions. We all must ascend. And the truth is, all aspects of us are here all of the time. Even the godly, most divine aspect. It's just our presence is not there. There's nothing really to ascend to. But when we are able to be present to all of these aspects, shadow, animal, monster, demon, God, whatever, then all of a sudden they dissolve. We absorb them. They're able to come into our wholeness. And then they don't, like you said, need to act out. They don't need to do those things because they have been absorbed completely. It is only the fragmented, disassociated parts of us that wreak havoc both internally and out in the world. And so the second book, Being, is really about the illusions that we bought into and the vices that we engage through those illusions that create the collective experience that we have. And if we are willing to really be sacred activists in this world and delve into this work, this is how one person can be the change. Because one person changing themselves in this way, changing meaning, seeing themselves, hearing themselves, knowing themselves so fully and completely, the world will transform in their consciousness and their eyes. And there will be a new way to be with the world in that place, as we spoke of before, in neutrality and equanimity, where there can only be love and compassion for everyone and everything and every experience that takes place.
Now, in your Being, the second book, you talk about these 7 illusions of social conditioning. And I just want to pull out a couple of them here: money and war, because I'm sure at the moment, these two are very prevalent for people. People are hurting financially, they're hurting with money. And of course, war is all around us. How can you just speak to those?
Yes. Have 7 layers to them. And each illusion has a certain obsession. We are all very self-absorbed, self-obsessed beings. How could we not be? We were taught that from the time we were born. It is the way we were as babies. And in truth, if we want to speak the radical truth, we come from a self-obsessed source. We come from a source that wanted to see itself in 8 billion beings and every other kind of species on the planet. That's a little bit self-obsessed. So we have to own that narcissism and that self-obsession in the divinity that it is. Only when we do that can we really delve into this work. And for some that may sound blasphemous, but if you really think about it, that is where that core is inside of us, of the narcissism that we're seeing so much in the world today. It is narcissism gone rampantly negative. And so for money, we're dealing with material obsessions. And we see so much of that in the world. What is it that you're obsessed to have, that you have to have, that you can't live without? And that is our global reflection of fashion. So what's in fashion? It might be, being all over social media. It might be having the biggest house. It might be wearing a certain sneakers. It might be being obsessed about, how you live, what you eat, what you wear. It could be any kind of material obsessions. And that speaks to this whole of greed that is inside of us. That layer that just courses through us at a very unconscious level, in the most subtle of levels in our physiology, that is the greed that has been passed down through generations and ancestry. And what that's asking us to, and each of these illusions has it, is to transition from one way of being to another. And in this case, it means transitioning from businessman to philanthropreneur, which is a
Mm.
completely different thing, but very distinct. And we do that by cultivating connection. So with each illusion, to dissolve it, we have to cultivate something.
Mm.
And to cultivate connection, you must heal thyself. You must petition for respect for self and respect for our world. And so each of the illusions go through these 7 stages to help unearth where that deep, visceral, physiological vice has been embedded, and how we can be at a higher octave in the world, whether in this case, businessman to philanthropreneur, or in the case of war, it would be revolutionary to spiritual rebel. Each one of them has a certain transition that we're here to make that moves us to a higher octave of being.
I love that. And, you know, of course, you speak of greed. And, you know, whenever I think of greed, immediately the next word that comes to mind is insecurity. It's like, if you are insecure, you need to keep grabbing at more and
Yes.
more and more and more. So I feel like, yes, you've got this cultural conditioning telling you, you know, oh, in order to look successful, or in order to, you know, make it to the private club or whatever, you need to have these things. But underneath that too is always this sense of insecurity of not being good enough. And that, I feel, is probably too what we're feeling a lot at the moment in our world. It's almost like this ripple, this vibration of a fearful insecurity. So people are feeling insecure in the world, which is ultimately, as you say, that reflection of the insecurity within.
And it's not just, you know, the material surface things like what we've talked about in terms of, you know, money and homes and, you know, all of that. This can go to a very deep level, even spiritual. You know, what's your spiritual greed? You know, where are you someone that constantly denies your highest, most holy self and expression on the planet because you keep thinking you need to learn more and more and more, or you keep thinking you have to get this degree and that degree. And there's all these different levels of greed that we have, that when we really look inside, we have to move to a certain place of knowing, a certain self-given grace. And the third book that will come out at the end of the year is Knowing, which is the 7 human expressions of grace. And this illusion of money correlates to a specific, you know, level of grace. It correlates to a specific living. So, for example, you know, the blessing of life correlates to the illusion of time. So life takes place, but we have this illusion of time that takes place. So that's what the second book, Being, correlates to. But if you move across to the book of Knowing, then all of a sudden the grace of simplicity is what is required. You dissolve time and you neutralize life through the simplicity that you bring into your own life. And so each of these books can be read individually and discover the 7 layers, but they can also be read across to discover the different levels of being that are operating simultaneously.
Beautiful, beautiful. And what about war? What do you speak about with war?
So war has everything to do with our mental obsessions. You know, we look at war outside of us that are between 2 sides, whether it is a couple that's divorced, you know, a masculine and a feminine, whether it is political parties that are against each other, or whether it's nations that are against each other. Regardless of what stage of war, it all boils down to mental obsessions. I have to be right. I believe in this thing. I'm dogmatic about what I think needs to happen. That's what creates war. And those mental obsessions occur when we go deeper from an inner battle that constantly takes place. So our outer expressions of war are really only mirrors to our own inner battles that are taking place. There's a part of us that believes what we say, and there's a part of us that really doesn't, but one side of us wins out. And so we express it. And that correlates collectively to our global reflection of information and technology, what we're fed through the media, through social media, through regular media, through technology. We are perpetuating these different dogmas, these different beliefs, these different fractures in how information is given. We saw a lot of the whole fake news thing. So then no one knows what is truth, what is lie. And so it creates more and more of these ripples to where the illusion of life just expands wider and wider. And this has everything to do with the whole of wrath. You know, it's that base anger, that rage that is at the core of every single human being that has been passed down through time from generation to generation that has never been allowed to fully express. If someone had been just allowed to scream loud enough at some point, they wouldn't have given it to each generation that has followed, but instead it has compounded. And that has made us revolutionary. It's made us go to war. It's made us rebel. But now we're here to transition the revolutionary into the spiritual rebel, which is someone that truly understands there's nothing to fix outside. There's nothing to fix inside. If I stay purely in my creativity in the present moment, then everything else around me will really dissolve into my creativity. And if we can really anchor in that, then what we're cultivating is generosity, a generosity of spirit, because spirit wants to come through us in that creative way. That is the purpose that spirit was so self-obsessed. It wanted to see how beautifully it could create through us. So that means we must see thyself. And in seeing thyself, we petition for peace. We keep ourselves calm. We bring ourselves to neutrality. We understand and start reframing that there is no war outside because we're dealing with the war that is inside.
I love that. I think I want to tell you of a little story around that. It was many, many years ago. It was when I was up in Maine, and there was a street festival going on, and they were going to be having different bands playing and, you know, all sorts of things happening, and you had to buy a ticket for entry and so forth. Now, I wasn't going to go on the Friday evening. I was just going on the Saturday, but I popped in on Friday evening to get the day ticket for Saturday. As I was buying the ticket for Saturday, I kind of wandered through. There were some like food places. You could have food, and then you had to present your ticket if you went to any of the venues for the bands and so on. But I heard this fabulous music, which I absolutely loved, and it was kind of like a gypsy South American kind of. It was fantastic. And I could hear it, and I got really excited. So I just started like walking towards it. And next minute I'm up there at the stage and I'm thinking, oh, this is so great. They must be allowing like free event, you know? Oh, that's so nice of them. And I danced and I danced and I had a great time. And then I went to, you know, and I went to go and I turned around, and to my left, there was this big fence. And I'm like, I didn't see that fence before. And then I go to turn around and go out the way I came. And then there was like this tent, narrow blockades where you had to walk through. And I go, wow, they must have like erected this in the time that I was up here dancing. I'm like, wow, that's interesting. And so I go through and there's people there taking tickets. And I'm like, wow, did you guys just like erect this tent, like, you know, in the last half hour? And I went, no, this has been here all day. And it was this incredible moment, Simran. And I mean, I know some people will find this very fanciful, but because I heard the music, it opened my soul. I just wanted to go and hear it. Somehow I managed to walk through that tent, through the blockade, not be asked for a ticket, and I enjoyed. And it was like, I knew in that moment that there was this kind of magical unfolding that happened in my perception. And because I could perceive of this generosity of music, this generosity of life, it opened up in a very, very visceral, a very practical, physical way. And so that's what I hear you saying here, that when we do cultivate that connection, that inner connection, where there is that respect for self and respect for other, where there is the opening to the truth, then that's when our outer environment changes.
Yes. Yes, exactly. So what you spoke of reminded me, the Celestine Prophecy was made into a movie. I don't know if you ever saw it.
Oh,
but in the
yes.
final scene, there is war that is taking place. The people are after the monk and his group that are trying to find the last scroll. And there's certain ones of them that say, hold on to your energy, stay neutral, stay within your energy. And the soldiers never saw those. But those that began to doubt, that began to drop into their lower level of being, all of a sudden they came into view of the soldiers. And that's exactly it. It's when you can embrace all of you to neutralize the lower parts and stay in the higher, which is what you did through that ecstasy, through that rhapsody of the spiritual rebel. Then all of a sudden, the reality that was there for everyone else was not your reality.
Exactly. So it proves it can be. And this reminds me of a Hopi prophecy, which talks about a time on this earth when there will actually be two realities happening. Those who will be living in that higher vibration and those who will be living in a fearful vibration. And they will be actually simultaneously living at the same time. And so it feels like we get these little forays, we get these little tastes, we get these little moments of like, yes, this is possible. Yes, this is true. And so I think that our job is to keep cultivating those connections, to keep cultivating, yes, this is true. Yes, this is possible. And the more of us that can do it for longer and longer periods, which comes through, right, becoming into that presence of what is, then there's the shift there. And I think, though, what is happening at the moment is people are falling into the distractions, into the interferences, into the vices, and they're getting caught. Even those beings who have, been on a spiritual path for quite a long time, I'm seeing their sense of hope, their sense of connection eroding. And, I think, again, it's just anybody who's on a spiritual path, I think they know how easy it is to slip off. If you really are
that's why
honest.
that is why I felt so guided to write these 3 books and why they're written in this particular way. It is to have people slow down. I don't want people to pick up these books and read through them quickly, nor will they be able to. The way they're written, the book will actually slow you down. It will make you be present and be with the material. I really only want people to read a paragraph, a few lines, at most 1 page a day, because there's so much in that little bit that you will read that you need to let yourself absorb it and allow it to marinate. I sat still for 7 years, feeling every single thing to the core of my being to write these books so that people didn't have to sit still for 7 years. If they just simply take a morsel of it every single day, perhaps a paragraph of living in the morning and a paragraph of being in the evening, or open them as oracles to any page that they want to and just read a few lines, they will get what they need. And it will be a reminder to stay present, to not get distracted, to not be pulled into the swarm, and to remember that the part of them that gets pulled into these places is their lowercase self.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being willing to sit for 7 years in the muck and mire. and for establishing your unorthodox blessings and the illusions and experiencing the pain and the glory for all of us, and for rising back out and actually be able to write it all as you're going through it. So as I know, it's a huge energetic undertaking when you write, because it's not, well, the way you and I write, we're not just writing about something. We are writing from within it. It is writing us. We are experiencing it. So I just want to thank you for that, and to say to all the listeners here to really come forward and to experience this trilogy, and to experience the living of the 7 blessings, and to experience the being, the 7 illusions, and the 3rd book coming out later this year, knowing the 7 human expressions of grace. So thank you, Simran, so much. And Simran's website again, iamsimran.com. iamsimran.com. So thanks, Simran. It's just been a delight, as always, to speak with you.
It's been my pleasure too. And, I have to say, in going through all of those years, I would not say that it was a pleasure, but in looking back, paradoxically, it was my pleasure. And I want to also say these books do not have my story. They're intentionally written so that people can apply their own lives to it. And I'm deeply honored to engage in this conversation with you. I knew it would be a rich one because it was you. And I'm deeply honored that you're sharing my work. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. And when knowing comes out, we can do it again, because that will be beautiful too. So everybody tune in next month. There's more conversations will be forthcoming. And remember, see my website, megandon.life, Divine Mother Meditation Series. Let's help the world through embracing our own inner calm and wisdom. And to those in New Zealand, to let you know, or those who may want to come to New Zealand, I will be presenting workshops at the upcoming Death Matters Conference in Christchurch, New Zealand in September. So there's more info on my website for that. Until next time, Arahanui.